fifth order of the day is a motion on declaration of state of emergency on the menace of drug abuse in Nigeria. Standing in the names of Honorable Francis Agbo and Honorable Fatoba, Honorable Agbo is invited to move the motion.
Gbadibo. I am proudly Benue, the food basket state. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to weigh in on the motion entitled Need to Declare a State of Emergency on the Menace of Drug Abuse in Nigeria. The House notes that a study has shown that there is a correlation between the level of drug abuse and the frequency and severity of crimes in any society, including transborder crimes. As a result of which, a vicious cycle of drug crimes has been created. Hence, it is often not surprising that many of those arrested for various kinds of crimes had been drug addicts. Mr. Speaker, also note that drug abuse and its effects are considered as a major challenge confronting teenagers and the youth globally. And it is now endemic in Nigeria among the youth, which has made it not only a scourge, but a threat to public health and security of any nation, as well as a pathway to contracting all kinds of diseases such as arrhythmias, irregular heartbeat, cramps, coma, and even untimely death. Further notes that incidents of drug abuse and addiction know no age limits, to the extent that young ones of 15 years of age are equally involved, and more youths are now getting involved in criminal activities than before, partly because they consider indulgence in drugs as fun or due to peer group pressure, while some do so owing to lack of home training or easy access to drugs. Equally note that the proliferation of drug use and the demand for illicit substances have also created an underground economy of its own, where crimes flourish as opportunistic criminals battle for turf and the proceeds, while exploiting addicts, corrupting and victimizing innocent people, aside from the fact that the habit hurts the victims' finances as a result of money. As a result, money is expended on maintaining the habit of drug or substance abuse, which is also a great influencer of antisocial behavior. Aware that the country is fast transiting from a corridor to a nest of barons who possess enormous resources with which they live ostentatiously while glamorizing both drug trafficking and its abuse, a situation that has negatively impacted on the youth, thus luring many of them into the venture, as a result of which Nigeria has been rated by recent statistics of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency as having the highest number of its citizens serving jail terms for various drug-related offenses across the world. Concerned that cannabis, described as the most abused drug globally by the World Health Organization, can be obtained from all corners around the country, Nigeria, yet another worrisome trend is the growing abuse of synthetic and designer drugs, coupled with the increasing number of household items and other easily accessible narcotizing agents, which have joined the list of abused substances in the country. Also aware of efforts made by the federal government in placing a ban on importation and production of some unregulated drugs such as codeine, tramadol, etc. Also concerned that the development is linked to the continuous upsurge in criminal activities such as rape, courtesan, kidnappings, armed robbery, banditry, and even accidents, all of which have created unacceptable burdens on individuals, families, communities, and the country at large. Recalls that President Muhammad Buhari, desirous of combating the menace of drug abuse, recently constituted a two-tier presidential intervention structure on the elimination of drug abuse in the country. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, this motion resolves that we should urge the federal government to urgently declare a state of emergency on drug abuse and develop preventive strategies such as creating a general as well as demographically targeted enlightenment campaigns against drug abuse. 2, also urge the federal government to ensure increased funding for the NDLEA and the drug regulatory agencies and direct its relevant health institutions to develop new and improved treatment regimens to help people with substance abuse disorders recover and regain normal lives. 3, further urge the federal government to establish functional rehabilitation centers that would have the status of specialist hospitals with psychiatric, psychologists, toxicologists, professional counselors, and other relevant experts working in such hospitals. 4, recall on the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency and the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control and other relevant agencies to develop and enforce a national prescription policy. Finally, mandate the committees on narcotic drugs, healthcare services, and legislative compliance to ensure implementation and report back in 3 weeks for further legislative action. I so move. Spiritual warfare as the focal point of the war against insurgency, crime, and criminality in this country. But it seems that the authorities are actually oblivious of the fact that crimes and criminalities of different shapes and colors are actually enabled, influenced, and propelled by narcotic drug addiction. Mr. Speaker, it is on record that over 90% of criminals in this country confess to drug addiction. But it is unfortunate that this country is not ready, and it has never worked seriously to destroy narcotic drug addiction in this country. And I tell you, Mr. Speaker, if we fail to destroy narcotic drug addiction in this country, narcotic drug addiction will destroy this country. Because almost all the problems we are having, criminals, they all confess to the use of these drugs. And they are all over the country. Unfortunately for us, Mr. Speaker, the NDLEA, established in 1989, that is saddled with the responsibility of checking these menace, including the power to prosecute. The NDLEA remains a toothless bulldog. And the reason is very simple. Apart from being grossly underfunded, the NDLEA still uses the arms that were used during the Civil War to chase drug traffickers. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, how do you expect the NDLEA to be effective in this circumstance? I also want to bring to your notice that the NDLEA lives on charity donations. A big country like Nigeria, the ratio of availability of personnel and deployment is 3 to a local government. This is not acceptable in this century. Secondly, the availability and deployment ratio of vehicles of the NDLEA is actually 1 to 6 local governments. That shows how serious we are as a country in tackling drug addiction. And I want to also say that the whole of Nigeria, we have just 8 sniffer dogs. 8 sniffer dogs. And these dogs were actually supplied to NDLEA by the Germans. So what are we doing as a country? We have already realized that drug addiction is actually at the root of the crimes and criminalities of this country. Yet, we are not doing anything to tackle it. And that is why most resource persons have said that while drug addiction is progressing at geometric progression, the means and strategies of tackling this menace is actually progressing slowly at an arithmetic progression. And we have to do something very seriously. For example, the running course of NDLEA that is supposed to be saddled with our responsibility of checking all of these problems is less than 200 million. This is a big shame to this country. And I want to urge Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, that the earlier we do something about this, the better for our country. Because as it is, every day we are confronted with the issue of drug addiction. Recently, I was privileged to be among the people that went to reconcile two warring communities. And the leaders of the two gangs told us that one of them said he just killed 42 people. The other one said 28. And that most times, it was after he had finished committing those crimes that he realized that he had actually done a terrible thing. Why? Because they are on drugs. They also confess to be on drugs. So, Mr. Speaker, I rise to actually sponsor this motion because I know very clearly that drug addiction is nearly and almost tearing this country apart. And it is my earnest desire that this House will rise to the occasion and help the NDLEA rev up its budget so that it can live up to its responsibility. Minor things like scanners, X-ray machines, they are donated to NDLEA. They don't have. And that is a big problem with this country. So, Mr. Speaker, I also want to move that if it is possible, so that we can make NDLEA to be a quasi-agency, so that it can actually have more funds and then embark on its responsibility, so that at the end of the day, we shall actually have cause to have some levels of peace in this country. The arms have not really helped. The arms have not really helped. That is why the soldiers are actually busy looking for spiritual warfare as solution to the insurgency in the country. But if we are able to tackle the menace of drug addiction, narcotic drug addiction, it will go in a long way to solving this problem. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.